You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Steven Willis, the host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. I'm joined by Brian Smith, the Florida football scout. And before we get started, I do want to let you know that LinkedIn is the college recruiting sponsor across the Locked On Podcast Network. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So, Brian, interesting stuff. We are getting ready. Like, media days is going to be starting Monday for the SEC. The Big 12 is already happening, which some interesting stuff already coming out there. They're talking about Florida State and Clemson and all that to the Big 12. That's the news story that's kind of floating around the ether, but we'll get to that at a later date. Ole Miss got a commitment last week from 3 players. They got one from Cortez Thomas, which was kind of a surprise out of the blue thing to where everybody was saying Mississippi State, Mississippi State, Mississippi State. He ends up committing to Ole Miss. And then 2 kids out of the state of Florida, and Samari Reed and Major Preston. But we'll start with Cortez Thomas. He is being recruited, I think, as a safety. He looks like a ball winner on his highlights. Talk about him a little bit.
I think he could play either. It depends on what your scheme is, who you have on your defense in conjunction with him, and really what he wants to play. Footwork is good, athletic, long kid, 6 foot, 6'1". Those are the kinds of players you need in your secondary now, because depending on how you play, you also got to adjust your scheme. I'm sure teams really hate playing against Lane because he's so multiple. And that's where a kid, really, to be honest, both the DBs we're going to talk about today can do different things. But Cortez in particular, like when you talk about him, I think he could be your nickel or he could be your outside corner. And if you want him to be the ball hawk at the back of the defense that calls plays, it's not out of the question. Now, where do you need him? Because he has the ability to break on the ball that's needed at corner, but he'll probably add, what do you think, 20, 25 pounds? He'll play at 190 to 200, somewhere in that range for the Rebels. So, yeah, he could play safety too. It's a good spot to be in regardless.
Yeah, and you look at Holmes County High School, the cornerback Samari Rogers went there, the guy that went to Miami and ended up transferring to Mississippi State. Samari Rogers' father is the coach of Holmes County. It's a very heavily Mississippi State area. That's the reason I'd say it was a surprise, because there are so many Mississippi State voices around this young man.
Well, in recruiting, I've learned that you never know, but that is kind of surprising. State of Mississippi's got a lot of pockets that are really strong one way or the other. And I didn't know that about that high school, but that's intriguing. So hats off to Lane and his staff for kind of getting over the top there, because it'd have been pretty easy to lose out on that one.
Yeah, pretty well. And people just assumed that they would, honestly, just because of that pocket stuff. Now, the other thing happened is in the state of Florida. And, Brian, why is Ole Miss doing so well this cycle in the state of Florida?
State of Florida is its own entity, brother. I mean, You live there, you know what I mean. The kids in Florida are so random. A few of the kids weren't recruited heavily by the Florida schools, but even then, you still got programs from all over the country coming, like Major Preston. He's from IMG. He's got offers from schools around the country. I don't know, but I'm sure Lane is very happy with it because they prioritized it before, but not necessarily had this much success. I wish I could figure that out, label it, bottle it, and sell it. I don't know what it is, but you're right. They're doing well.
I've got a theory, and my theory on this is this would have been the classification that Austin Simmons would have graduated in. These are kids that he played 7-on-7 with, Keon Young, all of that. He probably knows a good number of them. I think Austin Simmons is probably, when this is all said and done, is going to get a lot of credit for this class.
Well, he's a kid that's very easy to like, so I'm not surprised. Austin's a good dude, and hats off to him, because I'm sure it helps having your quarterback from the Sunshine State. He's the future of Ole Miss program. That's going to bode well for the Rebels.
So let's start with Samari Reed. He's from, I think, Coconut Creek, Florida. I think it's just a great name. Although I think, is he Monarch High School, the Knights?
That is correct.
The Monarch Knights, that one kind of doesn't make sense. But when you look at his video, He's a guy that you look at, he's like, oh yeah, I can see this guy being 6'3", 220 pounds and being that typical Ole Miss wide receiver.
He's an outside boundary guy for sure. I'd seen him play last year live. His body and his frame scream that, but he played some corner too last year. He's not like super twitchy, but for his size, he's pretty athletic, and he's just uses his frame so well to shield himself from the defender. He is the big-bodied receiver that Ole Miss fans are used to. Now, he'll still need to get faster and stronger and all that stuff. You just can't teach the natural frame that he has.
Yeah, really good player, and a wide receiver decommits. And I guess the shame on all of us that ever was freaking out over a wide receiver decommitting, thinking that it's not like Lane Kiffin's not going to find a wide receiver to fill this class.
Yeah, I always worry about trenches with Ole Miss. That's all I worry about. If they get trenches, they'll be okay, because receivers, DBs, linebackers, that state's got plenty, and they'll pick a few off in other states too.
Now, you talked about Major Preston earlier, the defensive back out of the IMG Academy. If you start for IMG, you can play. That is just a simple rule, And he's a little bit of an undersized guy. And I want to tell you, I want to get what your opinion is on this comp. He is a very alpha dog on the field. It looks like he is somebody that kind of looks like he's kind of, even though he's undersized, he's bossing it a little bit. Mike Hilton, is that the comp?
That's not a bad one. I think that he could play nickel or safety. So, and he's just always around the ball. IMG, obviously, every player they have on their defense going to play college football, but he pounces on the ball and he beats other Division I players to the ball. That's another way to look at it. Literally all 11 of their guys every year, like they're going to play college football on defense. So, yeah, that's an interesting comp.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. When we come back, we're going to talk about Caleb Cunningham, cookouts, and the immediate future of recruiting. But first, Game Time is the place to get your Ole Miss tickets. They have killer last-minute deals, all in prices, views from receipts, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Ole Miss tickets. Even Vaught Hemingway Stadium, you can see exactly what you would see from that seat. They have the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. Take the guesswork out of it. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Hey, this is the most anticipated football season in the history of Ole Miss football. This ticket code right here would help you out getting tickets. That Ole Miss Georgia game, that's right around the corner. So terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Brian, we have hit essentially cookout season. I mean, everybody is going to have their event at the end of this month, right before fall camp starts, to where they get whoever they can get on campus. And it's kind of the coach's last chance to be completely all in on recruiting before the actual season becomes a part of their lives. And Caleb Cunningham has said, he's confirmed with Inside the Rebels of 247 Sports that he is going to be in Oxford. And I think that's a big deal. I think in that interview, David Johnson said the top three that was kind of developing for Caleb Cunningham was Ole Miss, Alabama, and Auburn.
That recruitment is wild. We knew he was a special player long ago. We talked about him last year, but his recruitment has just gone crazy. Florida, Auburn, Bama, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, they've all been all over him, among others. And
all been the leader.
Yeah, that's another comment for another day. I just think the only thing you can do is worry about today and what you have planned immediately thereafter. Ole Miss gets the next swing. So maybe they can turn the attention, if you will, back towards them Bama's the most recent team to trend with him, but I think they're the last team to host him. So this is going to be a recruitment that goes to signing day. The more times you get him on campus, the better your opportunity to sign.
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, the cookout's a big deal, but also he needs to be there for games. He needs to be there for that Georgia game. He needs to be there for Oklahoma, the big SEC games. You need to get that guy on campus and not at Bryant-Denny Stadium or Jordan-Hare Stadium. He needs to be on your campus.
Those things will take care of themselves, and I'm sure they're trying to do that. But these kids, their travel schedules change constantly. So good luck on trying to get it worked out in advance. All the schools are trying to do the exact same thing.
So what do you have going on this week?
This week it's just scouting on film, man. A lot of kids, Alabama, Florida, etc., working more on 2026 kids because so much of the hay's in the barn for the class of 25. Recruiting has sped up a lot, Steven, a lot. And, I've already scouted some of the kids in Mississippi a little bit. That's kind of the next state I'm going to kind of roll into, but I briefly looked over, J. Rail and McCoy, et cetera. There's some, but it's time to turn the page.
Yeah. And next year, potentially, the June signing day is going to happen. And whenever that happens, it's really going to speed up the recruiting cycle.
They're trying to block it. Some of the SEC schools don't want it, blah, 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 but we'll see what happens. That'll go back and forth for years, I'm sure.
Yeah. Listen, this is my opinion. You can't complain about December being full and then say that this doesn't need to happen.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
We're on the same page here.
Yeah. It's one of the things where you either complain about recruiting in December and do this, or quit complaining about recruiting in December, because it obviously doesn't matter.
100%.
Yeah. So thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Brian Smith, the Florida football scout. Thank you very much, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.